Let's talk food and wine in Tonia's kitchen. Have a seat at the table. Here is Tonia King.
My guest today is cookbook author, recipe developer Faith Kramer. Today we're talking about 52 Shabbats, Friday night dinners inspired by a global Jewish kitchen, and the upcoming Passover holiday. I want to talk about some recipes that you might suggest. How are you, Faith?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you.
Give me a little bit of detail about your involvement with Jewish culinary ideas.
I grew up with two grandmothers, one who was a horrible cook. And we used to joke that her brisket only had flavor when she burned the onions. And the other was an amazing cook, but she was Italian, Hungarian Jewish. And most of her food was Italian and Hungarian. So I kind of discovered the wider variety of Jewish food as a young adult when I first started to be out on my own and participate in Jewish community events and go to other people's houses and things like that. So I came to Jewish food more from an international background because that was my interest. And what delighted me is that because of the diaspora and migration and just culinary interests that crisscross the world, the Jewish food is quite international. And that's what I started going down that path. And to me, every recipe tells a story. It might be political, it might be geographic, it might be economical, it might be a story of how people moved from one place to another and tried to recreate a little bit of home as they moved. And all these recipes tell these stories. And I just got fascinated. And I pretty much went down the rabbit hole of investigating the stories behind Jewish food and the communities and the traditions and even the cooking techniques and the ingredients.
For Passover, for example, you have some interesting dishes. Now, I'm not Jewish, so I'm not familiar with a lot of the foods that we would be normally eating at Passover. But your cookbook has some very interesting and creative recipes. So why don't you share a couple with us?
Basically, for Passover, you want to avoid anything that might be leavened or might be suspicious of being leavened. And that means risen by where yeast has been able to develop. So things with baking powder or something are okay, which is a big misconception. It's yeast or things that would have natural yeast, like a sourdough or thing like that you have to avoid. And then there's all these traditional foods as well. And every Jewish community has its different regulations. Very traditional Eastern European Ashkenazi won't eat beans or rice. And then Sephardic communities, some will eat rice, some will eat beans, some will eat both, but then some won't touch dairy. So it really depends on the community you're coming from, what you eat and not. So I go for that midline of what is mostly acceptable in my cookbook. And often on my table, I like to make these grilled lamb chops, and I serve it with what I call the bitter herb salad. And this comes from an interview I did with a woman that was an Egyptian Jew. And Egyptian Jews will eat roasted lamb or grilled lamb on the Passover Seder, where Eastern European Jews will not eat lamb on the Seder because it's too much like the sacrificial lamb, but they'll eat it other times in Passover. So I'm kind of threading that line. And this particular Egyptian Jewish community, known as the Karaites, had a tradition of, instead of a bitter herbs, like you might have been at a Seder or seen where people are eating horseradish, and that's their bitter herb to go along with the Seder, which means order of service, which is the home-based ceremony, if you will, that Jews perform at Passover. But the Karaite Egyptian Jews eat a salad of all different kinds of bitter herbs like fraise or radicchio or whatever. And I put those herbs together into a salad that uses matzah, which is the unleavened bread, as the crouton, and has this absolutely delicious whole lemon dressing on it. And you basically whiz up a whole lemon with the peel and the flesh, and it makes this delicious dressing that I use all year round.
I also noticed you have a pomegranate molasses brisket. Why don't you tell me how to make that? Because that sounds delicious. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, or a Seder or not. That just sounds like a wonderful meal.
You can make it with a brisket or a boneless chuck roast. Brisket is just the cut. Pot roast means it's like braised in a pot, and you can make it in the oven I prefer to make it in the stovetop. I feel like I have more control, but you could do it that way. You could do it in a slow cooker. You could do it in a pressure cooker, Instapot. So there's lots of ways to cook it. I prefer the stovetop. I feel like I have most control. Pot roast refers to braising the meat in a pot. And brisket is a cut of meat, but they're used kind of interchangeably.
Hmm.
But brisket has gotten very expensive. It's not always easy to find. So I find boneless chuck roast will work just as well. I don't make any other changes to the recipe. I will say find a chuck roast will cook a little bit quicker, and I will find that a brisket is a little more deeper flavored, but those are not hard and fast. It's just general.
So how do
So
you put it together? What are the
well,
ingredients?
I start with a 4 or 5 pound brisket or boneless chuck roast. Okay, so you take this 4 to 5 pound boneless piece of meat, brisket or chuck roast, and you season it with salt and pepper and a little paprika, a little cumin. You brown it in vegetable oil so it's got a little crust on it. And then I take it out of the pot and I add 4 cups of chopped onions and a couple of teaspoons of minced garlic, and I get those nice and golden, and then I add carrots. Now, to get the carrots to kind of to stay for the 3 to 4 hour cooking it's going to take, because you cook brisket till it's tender, not by time.
Hmm.
You want them cut into like a 1/4 inch round or a 1/2 inch round. Don't make them too small, or they'll disappear on you as
Right.
it cook down. A 28-ounce can of diced tomatoes, and you want to use ones that are just diced tomatoes. You don't want one with green chilies in it. You don't want one with basil in it, just plain diced tomatoes. And then you add the pomegranate molasses. Now, in case people don't know what pomegranate molasses is, it is the reduction of pomegranate juice. And in the cookbook, I tell you how to make it yourself. But to be honest, I always go buy it at the store. You
Yeah,
can
it's easy
get
to
it.
buy.
You can find it at a larger supermarket, a specialty market, some spice shops, and try to pick one that has nothing more than pomegranate juice and maybe some lemon juice in it. Try to avoid ones with added sugar and other ingredients. You want the pure taste, because this is going to cook for a long time. And if you have a lot of additives, it's going to show up in the final product. And it gives this wonderful, sweet, tart taste. And I really think that's what you need for any good pot roast brisket recipe. You need a tartness to cut through the richness of the beef. And pomegranate molasses is one of the most exquisite ways, in my opinion, to do it. So then we're adding a 1/4 cup of pomegranate molasses, and we're adding some tomato paste. And I like to add a little bit of brown sugar just to even it out, but that's something you can taste and add at the end if you're sugar shy. You simmer it on a low simmer, adjust it to keep it at a simmer, covered until you can glide a fork through the beef. It needs to be fork tender. And you flip it and make sure it's covered. If these meats give off a lot of liquid, so you don't need a lot of liquid. If you have a lot of liquid, you're going to be sucking out the flavor. The pot does get a little dry, add a little water, a little more water, and just keep an eye on it. And so this will usually take between 3 and 4 hours. I always recommend doing this the day before. And this is one of those dishes that just improves when you make it the day before anyway. If you're not doing it right away, refrigerate it, and then you can skim any fat you don't want off the sauce. And very, very important, when you're making chuck roast or brisket, you need to cut against the grain. Then that is going to give you tender meat.
Does sound very good though. I love the flavor combination. It sounds really delicious.
With that, I often make my tahini mashed potatoes or vegetarian soup with vegetarian matzo balls, depending on, I like to also offer a vegetarian selection for people, because not everybody at my table eats red meat. And I'm sure
Right.
that's common all across the world right now.
Let's go back to the tahini mashed potatoes. Can you tell me how to
Okay.
make those? Because that's really different.
Because every recipe in my book is, I don't mix meat and dairy.
Hmm.
So, since you're most likely to eat these mashed potatoes with something like this brisket with a lot of gravy to soak it up, it's a non-dairy thing. And it starts with, you can use russet potatoes or Yukon potatoes, yellow potato.
So are you boiling them or are you steaming them?
You can steam, you can boil. I like to boil them, I guess, because if the potatoes are too thick, I like to use some of the boiling water to thin it down, because we're not going to be using cream or milk or butter
Right.
on this, right?
Right.
So I use 3 pounds of potatoes, 1.5 cups of tahini sauce. So tahini sauce is made, there's a separate recipe for it in the book, but you can buy tahini sauce pre-made. Tahini itself is the paste, and you basically are thinning it down with lemon juice and water until it's a sauce.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, and I make it two ways. I make it with garlic and without garlic. Without garlic, I'll make actually sweet dessert toppings from it, and with garlic, I'll use it as a savory. So obviously, this is savory with garlic, and you're going to use olive oil and garlic, salt and pepper. You boil the potatoes, cook until they're soft, and you can be pierced easily with a fork. I keep back 1 cup, but sometimes more just in case, especially if you're using a russet potato, keep back a little more. And after I drain the potatoes, I want they're hot. I mash them until somewhat smooth. So if you haven't already peeled the potatoes, and then you add the tahini sauce, some of the cooking liquid, the olive oil, the salt and pepper, and you just mash it all together. And then it's a question of taste and how it comes out because every potato is going to need a little bit more water or a little bit more tahini sauce to make it come out. And I had this is the recipe that the Los Angeles Times said they didn't know they needed to make tahini mashed potatoes till they made it, and now they don't understand they hadn't been making tahini mashed potatoes the whole while. So it's great if you have someone at your table who's vegan. They can eat these potatoes. If you have someone who is sensitive to dairy, they can eat these potatoes. If you have someone that is gluten-free, they can eat these potatoes. It's a great recipe, and I use it all year round.
Sounds good. Let's do something sweet. What do you make for
Okay.
Passover that's sweet?
I have a chocolate berry rose flourless tart that is fudgy and amazing. Fudgy, rich and dark. The one tip I have for you is make sure it is totally cool before it's so fudgy and moist and that you won't be able to slice it to put the jelly, the jam filling in if it's not totally cool. You're going to use either a vegan stick margarine. Again, use a stick margarine, not a tub margarine. Tub margarines have a lot more water. They don't bake well and they will affect your recipe. So you want to use like a vegan butter or a vegan margarine, a parve margarine, just something, a non-dairy margarine. If you're going for that, a non-dairy butter in a stick form, or
Can
you
you
can use
use regular butter?
yes, use unsalted butter. You're going to melt a half cup of that with 10 ounces of bittersweet or semi-sweet chocolate chopped. This is one of those recipes you want to use the best chocolate you can get because it's all chocolate flavor. And that's mixed with because there's no flour, we're going to use almond flour, we're going to use beaten eggs to kind of give it the lift. And we're also going to have sugar and vanilla extract, some unsweetened cocoa to kind of help not just bind it, but it kind of smooth out the flavor. And the filling is raspberry jam mixed with a little rose water. And then you can top the whole cake after it's baked with confection sugar, a little cocoa, or you can use either a coconut whipped cream or a regular whipped cream and flavor it with a little of the rose water and just carry that flavor forward. And I always decorate it with raspberries.
Sounds great. Sounds like a perfect treat. Doesn't matter what time of year.
And again, it's gluten free. You can make it dairy free, so it's great.
We're talking with recipe developer, cookbook author Faith Kramer. 52 Shabbats is her cookbook with some delicious ideas for your next Passover meal. Do you have a website or how can we find you on social media, Faith?
My website is faithkramer.com. So faithkramer.com. And I am Faith Kramer on Facebook, and I am in Blue Sky, and on Blog Appetit, which is the name of my old blog, but I've never changed my handle on Instagram and Threads. And I do post a lot of recipes, and not just for Shabbat, but for around the year. And the book, it has a lot of detail in it about the calendar and the holidays, but it also has all these essays and stories about where these recipes came from, how I came to create the recipes or adapt the recipe, and the communities they came from, the techniques and the traditions, and the stories behind the recipe, which are very important to me. The book won an award for its design, and people are continually telling me how many pictures are in the book, and they think there's more pictures than there is. It's just such a user-friendly design.
Congratulations. That's great. Well, I really appreciate you giving me some of your time today and educating me a little bit more on Jewish cooking.
My pleasure. It's lovely to speak with you again.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you'll subscribe to this podcast as we continue to take you around the world of food and wine on Tonia's Kitchen.